Good afternoon. It is Friday, September 20th, and it is 12:30, and this is a special meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings, unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak, and if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. Let's do a roll call to establish quorum and which board members are here. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board and commissioner for District 1.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, there are 3 of us present, 2 of us remote. And for our agenda, we have Finley construction update, and the engineers are here in the room. And then we have an executive session later. Is there anything additional? Okay, so accept a motion for agenda approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on approving the agenda. Please indicate by saying aye. Approval of the agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda is approved. Now, Finley construction. Could we do introductions and then go ahead and get started?
Yeah. Well, if you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick, and then I'm going to say a few words to get us started.
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Chris Konechny. Ben and I are based out of Slayton, Minnesota. We'll get into kind of the specifics of the company here in a little bit. But I've been with the company about 9 years now, registered PE in several states. I am the client services vice president for our North region. So my job is to make sure that our clients are happy and that that I enable them to succeed with whatever opportunities they are pursuing. I have a pretty good background in strategic planning and grant funding. Have worked with Will and Kevin and Doug Dawson on pretty much all of your broadband related grant funding efforts to date.
Okay.
Ben Humphrey, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Finley Engineering, also the Chairman of our Board of Directors. Been with Finley Engineering since 1977, so I'll let you guys do the math. I started when I was 10 years old. Anyway, been with the company for a very long time through a lot of different changes and changes in technology. I'd like to thank the commissioners today for allowing us to speak with you. And we're very happy and pleased to be a part of this project the PUD is undertaking. It's pretty cool what you guys are doing out here. So thank you.
Great. Thanks.
And I'm going to thank Ben and Chris personally. We've built a really good team and a partnership with Finley Engineering. It's primarily because of these two. The PUD, we feel fortunate that they're on our team. And, you know, we're going to be real frank here. We've started out and we hit some snags, some hurdles with Finley. But any relationship or long-term partnership, those things happen. We've overcome those issues, and we're at a place now where things are going much better. The partnership is working like it is. A lot of the credit goes to Ben and Chris. We just feel fortunate that the PUD early on had Finley here to help us. You know, getting into the broadband business is a challenge, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of people going towards a common goal. And Finley has helped us go towards that goal, and they're going to help us complete our goal. So we're very fortunate. Thank you guys for being here, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We've got a PowerPoint deck here, so we can get into that.
And do you want us to hold questions till the end, or do you want to take questions as we go?
We can certainly take questions as we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll kind of summarize what we're going to cover here just So maybe people have a better idea of when to chime in with questions. We'll do just kind of a company overview, who we are, what we do. We'll hit, current, future projects real briefly, and then we'll get into, some future looking stuff with, specific to Washington's BEAD program. So I'll give it to you there, Ben.
Okay. To start out with, our first slide here, probably not a lot of wind towers in this part of the country, but.
Eastern Washington, there are.
Yeah, well, and we're from southwestern Minnesota. The Buffalo Ridge is there, which is something of a small continental divide, and it's one of the more windy, consistent winds in the country. So we have a very large number of wind towers in our area. So we're kind of used to that. Next slide, please. Finley has been in business since 1953. Our company was founded by two brothers, Carl and Fred Finley, in southwest Missouri in a town called Lamar, near Joplin, Missouri. My tenure with the company, I've had the privilege to know and work with both of them. They are both since passed, but so we've been in business for quite some time. We have geographic locations in Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Kentucky, and of course, Missouri, in southwest Missouri, and also a presence in Kansas City that specializes in power. Our Minnesota group was established in 1971, so we've been in the state for some time. And, you know, we've worked for our bread and butter money, I guess you could say, is a lot of this started out in the telephony industry.
In
Really.
the what?
Pardon me?
The what industry?
The telephony, you know, telephone.
Telephone.
Basically, you know,
Telephony. I've
before
never heard
broad-
that word before.
yeah, before broadband, you know, it was voice.
Right.
And, you know, that's where a lot of our efforts went. And, you know, the ILECs, the independent telephone companies in their smaller, many family owned or cooperatives is where we did a lot of our work with RUS funding, those types of things. We also have a group of electrical energy engineers in our Missouri office as well. And it evolved into, you know, the broadband industry that it is today.
When did it switch over from copper to fiber, becoming the means? of
Surprisingly, there is still copper in service in many locations, particularly in a larger metropolitan areas because of simply the cost to replace. But the fiber, you know, basically fiber started in the late 80s with the long haul networks, connecting all of the major cities and areas together, and then it expanded from there. Finley, our group in Minnesota, we did the first fiber to the home project in a community in Windham, Minnesota, which is about a town of 4,000 people. It's a municipal owned utility. They had the electric and they also had a cable TV system, which we converted to fiber to the prem system. And that was, some of the equipment at that time was so new, there wasn't even part numbers. It was still beta type equipment. So we were very proud, you know, that was right around 2000 when that started. So we've been in the business as far as fiber deployments for quite a long time, have a pretty good background and experience in it. Next slide. You asked earlier if we were a national company. The blue dots represent largely projects in motion or projects that, you know, we have recently completed. We've also worked overseas in the past, not something that we're really interested in doing these days with all the wonderful things going on in the world. But our core, of course, is the central US, but we've worked East Coast, West Coast, have a few projects up in your neighborhood here. Also, at one point, we had an office in Portland. We did a fair amount of work in the Portland area. We had purchased a company by the name of GE Raleigh and Associates. They were a survey company that did a lot of work in the electric utility industry. And that ran up until the early 2000s, and then things kind of, the economy kind of tanked, and so we closed that office down. But we'll go pretty much anywhere if the opportunity presents ourselves.
Have you ever done work for NOAANet?
We've crossed, not directly for NOAANet, but we've worked with them in the past. We've done some work with Ponder PUD on,
Yep.
you know, study work and pre-planning, but never worked directly for NOAANet.
Okay.
The stuff we've done out here primarily was like for Verizon, MCI, some of the long haul carriers. We did a connection from Portland up to Seattle, and also the route going east to across the mountains to like the Dakotas and stuff. And we also did, there was a sea cable that landed off the coast of Oregon, and we did the connections from the coast into the data center in Hillsboro, Oregon.
Okay.
So have a little bit of experience out here. So yeah, it's been okay.
Okay.
Staffing and resources, you know, we've been around a long time. We have a number of professional engineers on staff. I believe today we have 11 PEs registered in roughly 42 states. A little bit of history. Findlay, we were kind of organized regionally, if you will. So like each of our offices was kind of its own profit center and operated pretty much independently. A few years back, our board, we made a decision that we needed to reorg a bit and prepare ourselves for the future in the next, hopefully 70 years. And so we've established ourselves as more functionally aligned. So engineering, mapping,
You know,
project management office and those types of things are vertically aligned so we can collaborate across the country. And, you know, since COVID, we are something of a hybrid. We have people that work from home and work from different locations around the country. And then we do have brick and mortar locations as well yet. So it changed, you know, if there was any good thing about COVID, it identified the need for broadband in rural areas and really, you know, focused a lot of the funding on the projects we're doing today across the country. So next slide. Our services, you know, we're a full service engineering firm. So basically we can take the project from beginning to end or any piece in between, from the central office, equipment, layouts, all the way to the end. We do the design, and we're helping with the PUD, you know, construction management, contract management, the mapping, all pieces of the project. One thing we think we're a little bit unique is with our power experience, we have an understanding, you know, we think of the needs of both the utilities, and we see, you know, broadband and the electric utilities converging. You know, it started with the need for expansion of your SCADA systems and monitoring systems. You needed your own network to do that, and it became a natural extension to serve your customers or members as well. So it helps us understand both sides of the issue. Next slide. And that just is, I'm not going to read all of this. That's just kind of, in a nutshell, a lot of the services we provide. Out here, environmental has been kind of a big deal. And, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort to address all of the issues that we face in projects like this, particularly with the federal funding. They have, you know, much stringent requirements as far as environmental compliance than other projects may. So
I would just highlight here that we have a consulting group that's dedicated towards funding opportunities, feasibility studies. That's probably one of the fastest growing parts of our company. just because of the amount of new entrants into the telecom marketplace and the unique needs therein of people that don't know, you know, what
Right.
it takes to plan for the building and deployment of the network. We partner heavily with Doug Dawson on a lot of those opportunities. We view that as a good thing for us because we never want to be seen as pushing a project on a, you know, potential entity. If you have us with the engineering, design, budgeting section, and then Doug handles the financial feasibility operation side of thing to ensure the long-term success, that kind of, it's a good firewall so that we're not
Right.
seen as underpricing something in the hopes of getting more work done.
Right. Should you do it is help handled by Doug and you guys, how you do it.
Yes, very much.
We feed him a lot of, you know, the pricing information, like to build out the network and all those types of things, and then he takes that and does his financials
Mhm.
from there. So we've worked with Doug probably
Ever since-
more than 10 years.
Yeah.
It's been quite some time on a number of different projects. So he's a knowledgeable fellow. Next slide, please. Just a few statistics. We've completed more than 60 feasibility studies since 2017 on various projects across the country. As of last year, roughly 244,000 miles of fiber to the home or
That's
from
Just
construction.
stunning. You know, that is a stunning number for me anyway. I don't know. Like what our interstate highway system is by comparison to 240,000 miles of anything is pretty impressive.
And it's rather amazing, you know, you'd think we'd get done pretty soon, but we barely hit, you know, the top of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much to do yet, you know, and even with all the funding that's on the horizon, there's still not enough money, we believe,
Yeah.
to do it all.
Yeah.
So, and as Chris noted, you know, we've worked with a number of different funding programs. You know, we've been involved in the CAF2s and the state broadband grants and FCC, RUS. We've worked with RUS since the inception of the telephone group. Fred Finley actually helped write some of the original specifications for the RUS program, and it was back in those days, it was REA. But anyway, vendor neutral, which basically means we do not necessarily advocate for any one type of equipment or product. We try to do what's the best solution for the customer and location at hand. So obviously, the customer, if they're a long-term provider, they have preferences, and that's fine, you know, like for example, Minnesota, pretty purple there. There's a lot of Calix gear in Minnesota, but if you go farther south, Adtran has a stronger presence in our southern states. So it just depends.
And Calix is what we're using, is that right?
Yes. Over 30 years in real world network design, and that's basically fiber based. Before, you know, we did a lot of copper work. You know, that's becoming something of a lost art, the copper plant, but there is a fair amount of it in use yet today. Hopefully, you know, it was pretty scary for some of us like me when we first cut over to a complete fiber network for a customer, and you no longer had copper plant. And you know, there were challenges in certain types of special circuits and services that the copper was able to do, and the fiber we had to come up with new solutions for. So it's been an interesting ride. You know, Finley, we try to be on the leading edge, but not necessarily the bleeding edge of technology. So that pretty much covers who we are and what we do. If you've got any questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
I'd say continue.
Chris, I'll
I'll see
hand it
the
over to
hands.
you, and you can talk about the GIS a little bit.
Sure. One of the things that we've really pushed recently and it's made working with the PUD well here is strengthening our GIS capabilities. You know, we've been working in a GIS Esri environment since I think about 8 or 9 years ago. Dean started, testing the first runs with it, and really Dean has been the driving force behind all of our innovation there. But for most of our clients, I think about 3 years ago, we saw a switch from AutoCAD or various other platforms, be it NISC or Innovative or some of those types. It was about 85%, and then 2022, it just completely flipped on its head, and we are working probably 85% plus in Esri platforms. Now, the great thing about Esri is its interoperability with other systems. There are only 1 or 2 today that we can't work in Esri and then convert it on the back end, and that's really helped us with training staff, simplifying workflow, standardizing things, and getting good data standards.
And Kevin, what are we using for our GIS software?
We use Esri-based software, but it is through our NISC platform.
But basically the two are compatible. We can send plans and they can.
Yeah.
import them.
S3 is the underlying engine of the NISC.
Got it.
NISC is one of the easiest solutions out there to do the conversion on the back end.
Okay.
So, the thing I'll point out here is that, the GIS, used to be mapping was just a tool for mapping. But really what we've seen is this thing pervades itself into all sorts of different lanes of the operation of the network long-term. So locates, plant records and upgrades, reporting, BDC filings are out there, something that you guys have to do every 6 months. We're seeing a lot of headway in the operational and billing systems integration and the ability to push and pull data back and forth, either manually or through scripted systems that are developed on a one-off basis. Resource optimization, whether that's truck rolls, monitoring your network for outage recovery, or even with Calix now, there's potential outage recovery where it's testing the reliability, and you can integrate that into your map and try to see where potential faults may lie. Perhaps the biggest piece of this that we've seen a lot of buzz around is the real-time data of everything, and I would say a lot of that happens in the construction environment. So up there on the black is one of our dashboards, and you can kind of see as the crews are out there marching through things in real time. We have techs out there in the field. If we've got a good data connection, I'll caveat that. It's been a little challenging with the data connections here in some parts, but you can kind of see individual homes and places of pieces of cable being placed in real time. Current projects, I'm sure the board knows all of these quite well. Olympic Fiber and the in-betweens, those 2 projects are really one, just because of how intertwined they are. Approximately 2,500 passings. We are shooting to complete that at the end of this year. I believe North Sky is aiming for a November 30th completion date. East Discovery Bay and Jefferson North.
And Will, is that the end of the grant period too? And are we supposed to be done end of year 2024 or what?
The grant period has been extended into 2025.
Okay, so I'll tell them that, but.
Yeah, no.
Okay, good.
We've been instructed to forget that.
Yeah. No, you always want a little bit of cushion on the end.
And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to certify the network, to cut customers over, to do the closeout paperwork with the state and NTIA. So you want to leave yourself ample time to do those things on the back end.
Okay, now you're talking about East Discovery Bay. Sorry, I interrupted.
Sure, no problem. East Discovery Bay and Jefferson North, those are the next 2 projects on deck. Those will be separate bids that we're pushing out And we're estimating approximately a 60% take rate. I think we may be adjusting that somewhat per what we're seeing on the Olympic Fiber Corridor. Those are really good take rates. I would just say with what we're seeing across the country, that is very much an above average number. So I think that shows the need and the work that you guys are doing to get customers brought online quickly and start generating revenues. There's this whole concept of the kind of red zone of the project, if you will, of how fast, how can you shorten the time between when you spend the money to put the fiber in the ground or on the pole to start gaining revenue. And we're working through things to try to shorten that gap as much as we can.
Is it unusual that other parts of the country also have what we have, if basically the first 60% are getting it at no cost extended to them, or is it every place different in terms of
That's
costing money
probably,
to hook up?
that's a company by company decision for the most part. Certainly any of the grant programs often award extra points or require you to hook up, you know, some number of connections without a fee, or they want that disclosed in the application. So from that perspective, it's really common. There's this whole decision you have to make. We have certain clients that will put a drop to every single location in the project area, whether they will take, as long as they'll let them on the property to put the drop in, they'll put it in. And for a lot of those cases, we'll see 90% take rate, 95% take rate on drops up front, but they'll still only hit that, you know, 50 to 60% initial take rate, like that year one number. And so what it generally comes down to is the company's comfortability with that sunk cost of that 30% roughly of drops and how they view that. I would tell you the smaller companies that don't have as wide a breadth of capabilities, they're opting to put those extra drops in right away because the contractor's there, they can get it done, they can knock it out. And then it's not as, they can get by with a leaner staff on the operation side. The co-ops, larger companies, you know, people more in your shoes are opting to do, they're trying to nail that. Let's say it's a 3-year project window. We can get 60% plus maybe a little bit more. They're trying to time it so that when the grant closes, they're as close to, you know, getting all those drops built as they can. If that makes sense.
We've seen, you know, like as far as take rates too, you know, the marketing and effort that the company puts forth, you know, we've seen 30 to 50% take rate in the first year, and by the end of year 2, they're 70 plus, depending on how hard they push the marketing piece of it. And it's, you know, obviously the more people you have on network, the revenue comes in, and it's quicker to pay things off. So.
And I would say you'll see that big jump and then it tapers off. So you'll get 60%. Next year you might get 15. And then it kind of, you know, it's just like that hockey curve of tapering off, and then you kind of reach saturation at some point. The one thing that's interesting with yourselves is the fact that you're operating an open access network. That's not a common thing.
Right.
East of the Rockies, I would say that's a very rare thing. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long run.
Okay.
After that, Port Townsend Business District, I think that'll be a little bit of a challenging project just because it's a urban environment with a lot of old buildings, and it's just going to take a lot of time to get those service entrances put in. Nothing undoable by any means. It just takes a sharper eye than a rural build. And then last, Reconnect 4, we will stake that next year. So plans and specs next year, and then construction starting in 2026. That's probably a 1.5 to 2 year build. We are very close to getting through some of the initial milestones with RUS around environmental clearance on that project. There's a few problem areas that we're trying to work out with the state. But, you know, we've explained the situation to RUS, they're understanding and we're moving forward. PUD is very fortunate that they drew a good GFR.
So could you say more about that? What the issues are there?
I'm gonna speak about what I know. So it's down on Shine Road, I believe. And there's some pole lines that are on DNR property. And it's a little bit of what permissions do we need to attach to those poles and to operate on poles that are on DNR land? And what is the disturbance to vegetation and things of that nature that we're trying to work through?
Okay, but there are poles. Okay, so we might need to do earthwork around there, so, okay.
It's probably mostly related to brush cutting and efforts to get trucks through there to hang. cable.
Okay. Okay,
That is my understanding of it at this point in time.
okay.
RUS, basically with RUS projects, they have GFRs or general field representatives. There's probably about a dozen or so of them based across the US, maybe more. But that is basically your first line of contact for anything related to that project with RUS. So when you compare that to something like NTIA, where you're just going to the state agency that's a pass through, there's a lot more level of care there. They're really responsive and, you know, they're invested in the success of the project, you know, almost as much as the client is. Some, like anything, some of them are really good and proactive and know what they're doing, and some of them could use a little training. And we've drawn a good one. John Holman is your GFR, and we've been having bi-weekly cadence with him. It'll be a bit of a different process from what you guys are used to, just as far as the FRSs and reimbursement forms compared to the state. But given that you guys are an RUS borrow on the power side, some of that will start to fill.
Okay.
BEAD, we'll talk about BEAD here briefly. Washington State BEAD. BEAD stands for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. The total program is 42.45 billion pointed at broadband infrastructure. It's for all 50 states and territories. Washington was allocated just under $1.23 billion. So pretty good chunk of cash for deployment. Final is in quotes there. NTIA is kind of the belief that you can just draw a line in the sand and everything will just sit there until everybody gets to deployment. We all know that's not true. So I'll get into a map here in a little bit about how we're looking at some of this stuff. But this is final data as best we know it right now. Eligible areas are those that lack 100 by 20 megabits per second. So that's a benchmark that's been pretty common through a lot of your previous applications. Fiber coax and licensed fixed wireless. You guys don't have a lot of wireless just of any flavor out here.
Yeah, it doesn't work so great.
The trees really don't do you any favors when it comes to wireless. The thing I want to highlight here is this is going to be the most difficult grant process to put an application together and implement that we've seen.
Okay.
I haven't seen anybody that said there's anything that's harder than this yet. So there's a lot tied into it.
And Will still has some hair on his head, so he should have some capacity.
Haven't lost any more.
Yeah, he got capacity for
It's a little more.
difficult applications.
Yeah.
Still in the game.
Trees aren't the only obstacle with wireless. Being a wireless customer at the moment, weather surprisingly interferes with the wireless signal as well.
Probably when
Yeah.
you get the wind blowing things around it.
You know,
Well, fog.
Fog, interesting.
Or snow, like we're from Minnesota, snow can impact it as well,
Okay.
heavy snow.
it's not as bad as it used to be where it would just take it out, but it's kind of moved into it'll degrade the service, I'll call it. But
Interesting.
I would say the other thing too with that is for people that don't know a lot about wireless, what I would generally talk about is the term of spectral efficiency. And that concept is just really, can I do really fast speeds? Can I connect a lot of people? Can I shoot really far out? You can do all of these crazy isolated things, but you can't do them all together at the same time. So when you hear things about weather impact in wireless, it's probably because you've got kind of a marginal case anyways, that thing's not really as robust as it could be.
Dan, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, on the previous slide on the bead, the 100 by 20, I know Waputa is looking at trying to get this broadband office in the state to look at 150 symmetrical or better. Is that something that's going to change during the course of the bead applications and deployment? Do you guys have any, or will staff or Finley, do you guys have any insight into that?
Yeah, so there's two things that are kind of happening when it comes to speed criteria. One is the eligibility, so that is where can dollars be allocated to deploy broadband? That is really happening at the federal level. And states may do different things. That's pretty firmly set at 100 by 20 right now. The other piece of that is deployed speeds. So what do you have to deliver to those funded areas? That's where people are really starting to talk about those higher speeds and especially higher upload speeds. So you'll see things like 100 by 100 or 150 by 150, or even Minnesota state program requires you to do a gigabit symmetrical. And really where those two numbers come in at, often you can look at who's developed the program, who's funding the program, and what their agenda is. Do they want to push just some type of connection for anyone, or are they really trying to push fiber for everyone?
Right.
And usually you can look at those two things and kind of draw a line there. Does that make sense,
Yep.
Daniel?
So one quick follow-up. So on our application, are we shooting for the 150 symmetrical, or are we going to stick with the 120 as our plan moving forward?
We would claim gigabit symmetrical speeds and beyond is usually how we term it. The systems that you guys are deploying today are XGS PON systems capable of 10 gigabit symmetrical. Usually the scoring criteria, the top end is at 1 gigabit by 1 gigabit. So that's why we would say gigabit symmetrical and beyond.
But we're not going to be able to fund anything in an area that has 120 now. Basically, they have to show that the existing service is below 120.
Chris will show in the next map, but the state and the NTIA has already determined all of what they're calling the broadband serviceable locations. So it's all the single individual addresses that they have determined don't get access to speeds above 100 by 20. And those are the only ones that can be served.
Okay.
Correct. Real briefly here before we get into that, this is a timeline. I can tell you this, I pulled this from the Department of Commerce website and they're already behind. So, kind of take it with a grain of salt, but I would look at it more milestone based. This stuff is going to slip out. NTIA's got a monumental task ahead of it, as do all of the state offices, to kind of hit all the checkpoints that need to go through this. So, if I had to kind of ballpark it, I'd say Washington State is in the front third of, states in the US as far as when their applications will come out and get awarded. That could, we have elections coming up in November. I don't know the politics of the state of Washington, but all that can change at any point in time. So that's kind of where we're at as a snapshot right now. I will move over to the map here. So this is a custom. Oh, I gotta reshare.
We've been working with Finley and Doug Dawson on preliminary components of a BEAD application for the last year. Just slowly putting things together.
And when's the application due?
They haven't announced yet. We're
Okay.
assuming November, December.
Okay,
They haven't announced the opening of the application.
but we're trying to be ready
Trying to be ready quickly.
right at the beginning, okay, which has served us well so far.
So I want to start off with just a level set of the purple area is showing all of the areas we've been awarded funding in to date. We're primarily focused on Jefferson County eligible subscribers. So that is all the dots you see there. There's some stuff that lingers down into the southern edges, and I believe Will's working on some partnership agreements to take care of that. Some of that may already be served.
Could you zoom in a little bit just for fun? I know you're gonna have to
Yeah,
cut
where-
off part of the county, but
Where,
maybe
where do you want to
just zoom in like the north half and then we can
Yeah.
scan down to the south. Yeah, that just gives a little better feeling. So each one of those dots is a location that qualifies for bead service. Is that?
Correct. So
Okay.
if you even actually click on them, hopefully I'm right here. Yep. So you can actually get down to the physical address.
Yeah.
Of who is there.
And then maybe you can scan south, just
Yep.
kind of move it.
Yeah, and let's not click on physical address.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
It's just, just slide it.
This is all public data
Yeah, I know.
and all that, so I guess I'll preface it with that. One
Yeah.
thing I do want to highlight is there's a lot of things that we're already working on that this dovetails in nicely with. So that'll be a little bit of a decision of, some of these locations were planned as just a non-grant drop on some of our other builds, and some of them, we may want to consider delaying pieces and parts of that because we could get funding from another source. Primarily, is this Flagler Road? Am I
Yeah.
correct on my geography here on Marrowstone? Like that's a corridor that we were going to have to build with the North Jefferson grant. We could be able to get some additional funding there to
Great.
connect those folks.
Yeah, just move it south and show that too. It's interesting. So I guess, Will, the fact that it's in purple, does that mean that we've already got funding for it outside of BEAD or? Okay,
Yeah, the purple areas are the areas we've received funding for.
okay,
Some of the homes there are not covered by those grants. It's
Okay.
just the grant area passes over it.
okay,
Transmission, and then other areas, a lot of it is kind of like on the periphery. Like Flagler Road did not meet the 25-3 standard, so some of those homes, including mine, get 40 by 5.
okay.
So they weren't eligible for previous grant rounds, but they're now eligible.
Now that it's 120, qualify. Okay. And does the red versus yellow dot indicate anything?
Yeah, red is unserved,
Okay.
that's 25-3 or less, and yellow is underserved, that's 120 or less.
Got it. Okay, why don't you keep sliding it south just so we can see that. Very interesting.
So we've picked up the majority of the county already from our other projects. So this,
Mhm.
we have the in-betweens, and I'm tentatively calling this the leftovers.
Yeah. They never made it through the doors.
Well, a lot of them, we originally wanted to pick up, Paradise Bay area, some of that in the, in our Reconnect grant, but it's just, they were too adjacent to cable assets, so we couldn't do it, so we had to cut it out last minute. So it'd be fun to be able to pick up a lot of those areas. Discovery Bay Road, there's a lot of homes we couldn't take that we can now.
Okay.
And then into the Brennan area, I'm assuming that Hood Canal with their grant, where they're working with Mason One, will actually have all of these connected by the
Yeah.
time this comes around, but if not, we'll work with them. Make sure they're also covered.
Okay. Right, please continue.
So that is kind of one mindset of applications here. And then Will has asked us to look at some areas in Clallam County nearby. So the other thing that I will say is the state has issued what they're calling PAUs, or project areas. I forget what the U stands for.
Adjacent
Yeah.
project.
So
Adjacent.
it's weird because all of the grants to date have been census block based. So what was served or underserved was determined at a census block level. Then we had the BDC, and BEAD was supposed to be all about BSLs and individual point locations, and that was great. But then NTIA is forcing states to have project areas, and what's the most readily available geographic area that you can kind of manipulate? It's census blocks. So we're back to census blocks. So what you have here in orange is some census blocks. These are the Jefferson County ones. And then we've looked at 4 additional, and I'll zoom out here in a second.
And Clallam is spelled CLLAM, but you got, Chris, you got it covered. You got one spelled one way and one
Yeah.
spelled the other way. I love it when we do that.
Engineers always aren't the greatest.
Well, sometimes we have that in our memos too, you know, and you know, you're gonna get it wrong once, so you cover it both ways and. take the hit.
So these are areas that we're targeting in Clallam County. The one thing I will say here is we're gonna have to really look hard at this. And I did not load. So there's all the unserved, underserved locations in there. We also have a point file that is all the served locations. And in these blocks, that is 99.9% people that have a cable connection, cable coax, it's a sound wave, I think. And we would recommend that you build this network to serve anybody that does not have fiber if you choose to go after these areas. We've seen fiber providers be very competitive against the cable providers. I would say you're not going to see that 50%, 60% initial take. It might be more like 30%, 40% initially. Some people still hold on to that video package and like a set-top box.
So I missed what you just said. You said this is an area that's 99.9 served. What area are you talking about?
So what you'll let me zoom in here. So there are a lot of locations, you know, in Squim here, for example, these would all be served by a cable
The
provider.
blue,
Not
blue
in the
and the
blue.
pink. Oh,
Not
not
in the blue.
okay.
So the areas we would recommend that you size the network to accommodate, not that you would have to build the routes right away, not that you would have to deploy services in there or, you know, really invest much of any investment at all. But we'd recommend that you know, build it to handle that because there's more density there. It would be, you know, Doug and I have run this a lot of times and we'll look at it here, but we've run the model of you're better off building these things that will make the long-term viability of the project.
Okay, and we're not talking about actually going to Squim. We were talking about like Clallam County adjacent to Gardner more. Is that?
We're looking at the viability of a potential application to serve the area in green
Okay,
and the area in blue. And we've looked at all
really?
the areas in pink and yellow. So the area in green is the Miller Peninsula and then
Yeah.
just going into the rural area, butting up to the National Forest. And the majority of the BSLs in the area in blue are south of Highway 101. So even though all of Squim is well served, yeah, that area to the north or to the south, we have fiber presence in each of these areas. So it would be potential for us to expand to serve these areas. It would be ambitious. The green area is 700 BSLs. The blue is, I think, 1,300.
And BSL, sorry, again, is a
Broadband serviceable location,
Okay.
eligible for BEAD
it's
funding.
basically a customer, potential customer. Okay.
Yeah, so the green area makes a lot of sense. The blue area makes some sense. This would all be contingent on working with Clallam County PUD.
Yeah.
But basically the way the BEAD grant areas work is they're almost an auction. You
Yeah.
put up your best application to serve the area and they're awarded by each area who put up the best application.
Okay. And are we talking to them about collaboratively doing that or?
We talked to them about collaborating. They don't really want to collaborate.
Do they mind if we stake out their territory?
So, because they've set up a, an excess capacity model for their fiber
Yeah,
network.
yeah.
So if people can log on to areas where they've already built fiber, they don't want to take the steps to serve all of their customers the way that we have. So we
Right.
would look at operating as an ISP
Right.
that they would endorse, basically.
Yeah. And I know that they've worked with, for example, the county And is it Wave?
Sound.
Astound, yeah. So
Have partnerships and they're looking at a big partnership with Astound. So we're putting together a package to see if there's potential.
So they've made it real clear they're not interested in doing retail, and they're not going to get bent at, or comfortable that they're not going to get bent out of shape if we put together a project down the road in their territory.
Well, it would be very soon we'd have to move forward on this if we were to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't do it without their agreement to the project.
Okay, cool. Just like Clallam County.
Or presumably the board's agreement.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
But because of the deadlines, we have to, if we were to take action, we have to study the feasibility now. So that's what
Okay.
we've done.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, I don't like the term targeting that was used earlier. I'm not sure what context that could or should be taken in. Clallam County is a NOAANET owner, and they do work on things with NOAANET. So I wouldn't want to make any presumptions as to what Clallam County's plan is or what they would or would not accept without a lot more discussion between our board and their board in particular, let alone between our staff and general manager and them. So again, I'm just kind of curious as to, I heard our staff just say this has to be undertaken in a short amount of time. What is the process we have set up for determining whether we should do that? That being proceed with anything moving into Clallam County.
We're almost done with the feasibility study for this expansion, and we will present that to the board. And we would share some of our plans with Clallam as well.
Okay.
Hey, one more quick question. I probably could have asked Clallam this at some point if I'd have been thinking about it. Did they put in for BEAD? I mean, where is Clallam County? Are they going through NOAANET for BEAD? Are they doing their own thing for BEAD? I know Clallam has a project going out by the Elwha west of the 101 or the 112 intersection there. So what exactly is Clallam's current build out and plans with as it relates to BEAD?
I can't speak for them directly, but I've attended the Clallam BAT meetings, and the intention, as I understand it from those meetings, is that Astound is going to apply for all of the service areas in Clallam County and wants the PUD as their partner in that.
Okay.
So we think we can offer those, our neighbors a better package. And it's helpful to our network. So we would like to see about making that offer if the feasibility study comes out in our favor.
Okay, so the board will be hearing more about this.
Yeah, I would like the board to be really up to speed with this, with Clallam's board in particular as well. I think there needs to be some continuity there between commissions as much as between staff and general managers.
Yeah, and we can't submit anything without approval from all parties. But we can't, like I said, we have to develop the feasibility.
Okay.
Okay.
And actually, before we jump off of that, this is an educational opportunity for the board. So in that situation, and we can stay Astound Clallam, or we can say private ISP and generic public utility. If, let's say they got that award, they got a BEAD award, would they have to operate it as an open access network?
No, there's more points if you do an open access, but you don't have to open it up for 3 years after the award.
Okay.
So you can be
No, go ahead.
exclusive operator for the first 3 years, and then you're supposed to open it up after that.
Okay. Rod, did you have a comment or a question?
So you have the area of Port Townsend proper that is at present only covered by the Port Townsend business thing. What about serving Port Townsend itself?
So at this point, we're only looking for grant-funded projects for our expansion. When we complete everything in 2028 is the goal. There would be the opportunity to use the existing assets to move into dense residential areas. And we would need to do that probably with a low interest loan funded program, but that's a ways away.
So there's funding to serve SQUAM, but not funding to serve Port Townsend?
No, there's only funding to serve areas that have been designated as a broadband serviceable location. So in Port Townsend, there's just
Can
not.
you
as
zoom
many
in on
going
Port
out.
Townsend just for the heck of it?
So you'll see some in the very north end, there's a tight cluster and it's actually Fort Ward.
Oops, zoom, you're too far in.
So they're just kind of spread out. Yeah,
So
that
swim is disadvantaged.
Swim just has so many more locations as well.
And I think that one red dot in Uptown is my house because I went on the map and got them to amend it because they were showing I had access to high speed. And I'm like, no, it's
Real trouble with going to swim, but not serving Port Townsend.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and for us, our whole program is built on, we're building where we can be where the capital construction can be funded. So it's not our preference. Our preference would be to capture those areas adjacent where we have existing fiber. And we have that in those two locations.
And what I found in town when I looked up my house, for example, and it's on the NTIA maps, am I using the right terminology? There was these non-existent companies, or I think Astound was claiming to offer some higher service than it did in some non-existent company that offered it, and I put in an appeal through the process, and a while later got a no objection, and they took me off. But I suspect most of town people haven't done that. And some parts may have 120 plus service, but I don't. Anyway. Thank you. Good question.
Or you haven't applied.
No, I don't have.
You can order.
I-
You got 400 bags out at Calipoint.
Yeah, I've got some.
You just have to place the order.
I've got some minimal. I've got the best that Wave can give me where I'm at with the copper I have.
I think we've.
Talking two different systems, but okay.
Yeah,
We don't have fiber next to my place.
there's a lot of issues with the BDC filing and that it's provider reported data, and then the onus is on an ISP or somebody like yourself or the individual homeowner, business owner to dispute that. I will tell you that the bar to dispute that as a homeowner is not terribly high, but the burden of proof and the hoops you have to jump through to do large scale challenges as an ISP is extremely difficult. Again, you guys don't have to deal with this, but we're dealing with some wireless challenges, and that is almost impossible because you're trying to model spectrum on stuff that you have no data on. So it's kind of a difficult process. Just a few other highlights. Will talked about scoring criteria and such. The application process will be 60 days. I believe they're only doing one round, so it's kind of a one and done.
All or nothing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it'll be the big show. I think they're saying scoring will last for 30 days. The one thing in all of this is the state of Washington will be required to prove that they can provide service to not just those dots I've shown you today, but every dot that exists within the state of Washington. And they have a $1.23 billion budget to do it. And that is impossible without things like Starlink and fixed wireless.
Yeah.
So the state is going to be under pressure to balance the budget and figure out how they can check the box for every single dot in the state. And that's a tall order in 30 days.
So do they not get the money? And that's the plan, getting their plan approved.
Right.
They don't get the money unless they have a plan that's approved.
So let's just say that the state pulls off a miracle and does this in 30 days. It goes from the state, they submit that to NTIA. NTIA would have to review and approve their plan. I believe they're saying that process will take 90 days. And at that point, the money will flow from NTIA to the state.
Okay.
And then they will be able to sign contracts with the individual ISPs. You'll have to start going through environmental processes and then start deploying. So those are kind of the major milestones that need to happen.
Okay. Dan, did you have another question or comment? You still got your hand up. I don't know.
Yeah, I did. So I guess this is for staff. A little more clarification on looking forward here. Are we currently expending funds for engineering or other issues related to a Clallam County extension of our network?
Yes, we're expending funds to develop BEAD feasibility.
And you're going to come, and approximately when do you anticipate coming back to the board with your planning kind of complete with a proposal to us for what you're intending to apply for BEAD for? What do we know what time frame? Is that pretty darn soon?
So the first step is Kevin and I have to spend some time discussing because I've been working on getting all the information.
Okay,
And then we will review and then we will move to the board with next steps.
sure. And in some ways, this is the first touch. We're seeing you in the middle of the process a little bit right now.
Oh, very early.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of difference between, where Will is in this process and where I'm at
Sure.
this process.
Sure.
We're,
We're seeing the cooks in the kitchen and the meal isn't done.
it isn't done yet. There's a lot of timing, a lot of things that have to happen.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this funding, I don't even see that we would be at construction until 2027 if any of it was awarded
Okay.
So
Any of
we're
the
a
BEAD
ways out.
funding?
for the BEAD funding, yeah.
Okay. All right. Please continue.
Yeah, great questions there. Some other scoring criteria and things to note. This will be requiring a 25% match, so we'll need to figure that into our calculations. So that'll be, a $10 million project would require $2.5 million outlay minimum from the PUD. Obviously, you get more points, the more you're willing to raise that bar.
And at this time, the state of Washington is pledging the match.
Okay.
There's no match required.
Okay. But that would just be the federal money via the state, and then the state would have to pull that out of their own budget.
Right.
So other scoring criteria, affordability of service. So you're granted extra points based on where you set your price for gigabit symmetrical service. There's some stuff around fair labor practices, which just given everything that we're doing on the other programs and where wage rates are as far as like Davis-Bacon rates compared to what
Right.
you guys pay anyways, that's not a concern. Speeded deployment. So one thing we will have to talk about is they're awarding extra points for projects that are completed in less than 3 years. So,
Mhm.
does that make us want to fast track things? Extra point for open access and wholesale retail, wholesale services. I don't think we should run into any tribal areas, so we should be out of that. There'll be some extra points around adoption and digital equity plans. Again, things that we've kind of talked about and have some boilerplate ideas around.
Can you pause just for a second? You mentioned tribal, and if you zoom out again, we're getting into Clallam County, but there is the Jamestown Sklallam tribe there in Berlin. If you go to the left, to the west, there a ways, right there, stop. And has there been do we know anything about Jamestown's? I mean, and they're a tribal entity. Can they get BEAD funding?
They can, yeah, they're involved with the BAT, and I don't think they're planning on
Okay.
doing separate applications.
Okay, and I would say the same thing applies. If we're planning to do any work over there, we should out of courtesy be talking, even though they're not a utility and they don't necessarily have their own poles. That's Clallam's area, I think, is a sovereign entity that we should be talking to them, especially since they have their own JNet, too.
Yeah, and Karen Affeld from NODC has been the facilitator for their BAT, so she
Okay.
and I are in regular contact.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that not having tribal support is a pretty much an automatic disqualifier every state for BEAD. So that is something that will have to be done. We talked about prevailing wage, environmental, and SHPO. The one thing to talk about there is we have had some back and forth with the state office on this, and we may get into a position where we might have to do kind of a pre-environmental assessment, and that is something that we would have to get a subcontractor for.
So this is the State Historic Preservation Office for Port Townsend, for like the National Historic District in Port Townsend. Is that what you're talking about, or what are you
State
talking about?
Historical office,
Right.
as well as the DNR natural resources
Okay.
part of things. They're talking about awarding extra points or requiring applicants to do some risk assessment. And
Okay.
it's very gray as to what that means, but what I believe it comes down to is the state grant agencies and the feds are getting tired of hearing that, like, well, I have this issue on a project because I can't clear this and I can't clear that. And a lot of these environmental and historic data sets and issues that we run into, that's not public information. So that's not something I could just dump into this GIS map and we could plan around ahead of time. That's only stuff you figure out when you're into the project. So I think what the state and the feds are trying to do is do this balancing act of, well, how do we get applicants to do some of this pre-work,
Front load it.
but not, I mean, the environmental bills on some of these projects are astronomical, and to do that with no hope of reimbursement is
Yeah.
a big cross to bear. So that is something that we're watching pretty closely. The state says they are working on some guidance, and that will be part of the training webinars once the FOAs come out and
Okay.
the actual funding hits the deck.
Okay.
And then there'll be some reporting requirements. Looks like most of them are quarterly or annual on this. So that's kind of what I've got
Okay.
related to bead.
Right.
And I think that pretty well wraps up our deck here. I guess I do have.
I'm gonna push you along. I'm sure it does because we have to get to an executive session.
Sure.
Okay. Did we schedule the executive session? What time?
Just at the end of this meeting.
Okay. Could we, I had a question, and it's more kind of clearing the air, because we had some gnashing of teeth and painful moments when we were trying to get different grants in, and your guys' names would come up as the plans weren't quite ready, had quality issues, whatever. And I assume, like anything, there's probably on both ends. But you made it sound like things are much better now. And I'm kind of wondering what we learned on our end in terms of issues that were holding us up on that, and what Finley learned and adjusted. Could you maybe just give us a little insight into that?
I'll give you my perspective. You know, everyone's gonna be a little different. My perspective is, with any partner, and I'm talking early on, we should have been present at the start. We should have had our questions answered. We should have gotten some things worked through that we didn't until it became a crisis. And
then when it became a crisis, you started flying out there a bunch. I
yeah,
remember.
it's crisis. It's tough to move forward.
Yeah.
So, and I feel as a PUD, we have tried to do this on the cheap with very little manpower. And that put all of the burden on Finley, and we didn't get what we wanted.
Yeah.
And we weren't good about communicating what we wanted.
Yeah.
And we are still short of some expertise.
Okay.
To help move these projects along. So from the PUD standpoint, my standpoint, the communication early on was not there. Even today, we still don't have enough in-house expertise to really, ultimately, this is our network. We have to get what we want, and that means working closely with Finley, and that's where we're at now.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe not necessarily making the personal in-person connections early on, hearing what they were going to need, realizing, gee, maybe we don't have a person who can easily answer that. And that's a lot better now, but we still have a ways to go.
It's like any relationship.
Yeah.
It grows as we bring people on, we try new things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I am pushing hard to get someone in here with quite a bit more experience.
Okay. And Dan, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Jeff. I had one pretty similar to that, so that kind of answered the one question I had. The second one dovetails into the general manager's response there, and that is other question is, I guess maybe it's a concern, I wouldn't call it concern, I guess the question is, does Finley have, the capacity to deliver the products we need on a timeline that's going to meet our timelines with the projects and the grants we have coming? Do we anticipate that there's going to be a squeeze to where we wouldn't get prioritized, for lack of a better word?
So I'm gonna answer this. I feel comfortable that Finley has the resources. I'm not comfortable with the PUD's resources at this time.
Okay. And it's really a teamwork, it's we're working as a team
Yeah.
to put together this information, to create the plans, to create the budgets, and that takes time and people. I guess the question I have is, what are you guys hoping to accomplish while you're out here, and what have you learned so far while you've been out here?
Basically, this is the first time we came out to meet with the PUD, so number one was to meet with the board, so you have some familiarity with us. Also, a review of some of the project work that's been complete. Chris, as the supervising engineer, needs to sign off on the work that's completed to certify to the funding agencies that the projects have been completed according to the specification. So yesterday on the way in, we spent some time driving around this morning. We drove around for 3 hours probably this morning, just looking at the routes and looking at the work that's been completed so
Okay.
far.
How's it seem?
For the most part, pretty good.
Okay.
Yes. Obviously, there's issues in some areas that need to be corrected, but overall, I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I would say, the issues that we are finding are not monumental. They're relatively light
Okay.
lifts. So
Okay. All right. So commissioners, any other questions since we got the engineers here? Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add?
no, just want to say thank you for the time and the opportunity to work with you guys. It's been a challenge, no doubt, but I believe we're making good headway, and look forward to continued success with you guys.
Well, and hopefully you can help us with our goals and then learn from this and help other folks in a similar situation.
That
It's
is
always a learning experience
Yep.
when it's a large undertaking like this. And yes,
Great.
these
Okay.
are very complex projects.
They are. So
Well, thank you very much for coming out here
Yeah.
and meeting with us. This was very informative and nice to be able to connect faces now with the name of the company.
yes, and we won't take your name in vain so quickly.
Yes, thanks for your presentation.
All right.
Thank
So it is now 1:43 and we are going into executive session. I'll read that off, but how much time are we going to need?
Can you do 45 minutes?
I can't, I've got a hard stop at 2:00. The meeting,
Dan and I can keep going.
This is something I probably need all three of you there.
Okay.
So we'll go 15 minutes and then schedule something as soon as we can.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read it off per RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 subsection G. To review the performance of a public employee, we are going to go into executive session for 15 minutes. We are now going into executive session.
I'll make sure it's set up.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod. Okay, we have completed, this is Jeff Randall, President of the Board. We have completed our executive session. We have one issue where that executive session, we basically need another special meeting for the purpose of continuing the discussion or the issues that we have in that executive session. And we're looking for dates, and we lost Ken, but Dan and I are here, and we're wondering about next week. And we realize that people will be traveling, and there's the Waputa Water Workshop, but we were looking at Monday as a possible day. And Melanie said that you two are traveling.
We're traveling, But we could do Tuesday. Does Tuesday work?
So Tuesday,
No, it doesn't work for me.
okay. And Ken had issues with Wednesday. I was actually looking to, actually, we've got a couple weeks. We've got the first week in October too. That if, how does that week look
Better?
for you guys? Because that Tuesday, we don't have a meeting.
Works for me. Melanie?
I can make that work.
Dan? That's October 1st.
Let's see, October 1st, September.
That works for
October,
me that
yep.
day.
I think from the looks of things, I'm free October, or, yeah, October 1st.
Okay, so let's say, Joel, you're gonna send out some information. If
And
you,
yeah, is there a time you suggest, or we'll have to,
and I guess, October 1st, what if we just said 4 o'clock, which is our normal time, or should we say 3 o'clock? Right, I guess, I mean, you need to reach out to Ken.
I'll check with Commissioner Collins.
3, because if it's a special meeting,
Yeah,
we usually start at 3 anyway.
yeah, okay. Yeah, why don't you ask if we can make it start at 3? Dan and I and you guys will pencil in our calendars, and if we can get a confirmation from Ken, if that can work for him.
I'll
Then we
do
can
that.
formal announcement out and agenda and all that stuff. Ah, okay. Did we have any other business? I'm not seeing anything. So, okay, it is now 2 o'clock and we have completed our business and we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Bye, everybody.